Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Going through our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Just after 2:30 AM on the 8th of November 1995, Essex Police Constables Crick and Cohen were called to Felixstowe Ferry car park to investigate a report of 3 men landing a boat in suspicious circumstances. The pair arrived to find a blue D-Reg Range Rover attached to a trailer with a large inflatable boat on it in the car park close to the sailing club. The side lights of the Range Rover were on and the doors were open, but there was no one around. PC Cohen was examining the vehicle and making a note of a large iron bar that had been placed between the front seats when someone came running over from the direction of the sea defences. "Oh," said the man, slowing down when he realised that he was dealing with 2 policemen. "I thought someone was trying to steal my motor." "So all these items belong to you, do they, sir?" asked PC Crick. "Well, the boat is, but the Range Rover belongs to my brother. We've just been out diving, me, my brother and Gordon Stevens. You just missed my brother. He drove off about 10 minutes ago. He's got all the wetsuits and diving gear with him." "Diving in the middle of the night? What's the point? You can't see anything." The man scratched his head for a second. "Well, the thing is, the water's not that clear anyway, so it's just as good as night as it is during the day. But anyway, we didn't get much diving in. We had a bit of trouble with the boat. That's why we've been out so late." "I see, and what would your name be, sir?" asked PC Crick. "Womes," came the reply. "Jack Womes." Just then, a second man appeared by the slope over the embankment, but vanished again as soon as he saw what was going on. PC Cohen rushed over to try and find him. At the top of the slope, he looked to his left and saw the lights on in a wooden beach cabin called Feronia. He could see a man standing by the window looking at him and walked to have a word. The man identified himself as Gordon Stevens, and according to Cohen, behaved in a way that looked evasive and uncomfortable. He said he had helped a couple of people who had difficulty with their boat on a sandbank, but didn't know their names. PC Cohen asked if he could look inside the house to see if anyone else was there. Stevens refused. By now, other police officers were starting to arrive, and they escorted 2 men who had been hovering around the nearby sand dunes to PC Cohen just outside Feronia. Both men refused to give their names. One of them was in a furious mood. "Why the hell have you surrounded this bloke's house with these police officers? He hasn't done anything wrong. This is his own for fuck's sake. Don't you people have any respect?" Eventually, the man calmed down and reluctantly gave his name. Michael Steele. When no one reacted, no one instantly reached for the handcuffs, he seemed almost surprised. As far as the police were concerned, he wasn't one of the men who had been in a boat with Jack Womes. He clearly knew Gordon Stevens, but that was the only connection they could come up with. He was pretty much free to do what he wanted. Once Steele had relented and given his name, the man with him finally agreed to do the same. He was Peter Corey. The police now concentrated their efforts on Womes. It was his boat after all, and they needed his permission in order to search it. Nothing was found, so Womes was told to wait until customs officers arrived, while Steele and Corey simply wandered in and out of Stevens' house, chatting quietly to one another. With hindsight, it might have seemed a little naive, but at the time the officers at the scene felt they were doing the right thing. There didn't appear to be anything in the boat, and although the men were acting a little suspiciously, there really didn't seem to be anything going on. When Steele asked if he could start cleaning the boat to prevent the salt deposits from building up on it, they saw no reason to say no to him. And so it was that customs officers arrived some 20 minutes later and saw their sworn enemy. The man they had vowed would never make them look stupid again, washing down his flashy new boat with a bucket of hot soapy water. It was then that Steele got the treatment he'd been expecting all night long. There were a chorus of screams. "Get that man the fuck away from that boat!" And Steele and the others were dragged away in handcuffs. At 4:25 AM, Steele, Womes and Corey were all arrested for being concerned in the importation of drugs. The process of gathering evidence against them began. Back in Basildon, Tony Tucker was having a sleepless night. He wasn't worried about Steele and the drugs. As far as he was concerned at that time, everything was going according to plan, and his little £15,000 investment was about to double in value. Tucker was nervous because the previous evening he had performed the ultimate act of friendship. He had given Pat Tate the keys to his black Porsche so he and his new girlfriend Lizzie could go for a spin down to Southend. Tucker was in a difficult position. Tate was his best friend and a fully grown man. You couldn't treat him like a child. But then again, Tate had only been out of prison for a couple of weeks and was smack bang in the middle of this hedonistic bender where he was burning the candle at both ends and living life to the limit. Rather like an irresponsible teenager. So irresponsible, in fact, that despite the fact he was driving his best friend's valuable and cherished sports car, Tate had spent most of the day indulging in his favourite cocktail, Special K and cocaine. The result was inevitable. As he sped across a mini roundabout on the edge of the A127, he lost control and smashed headfirst into a set of railings, instantly converting Tucker's pride and joy into a twisted heap of scrap metal. By then, Tucker had heard that Steele had been arrested, but he had no idea what was going on. When Tate phoned to tell him about his car, he just started ranting and raving, screaming out abuse. That fucking bastard, all he was trying to do was impress some silly young tart. Tucker was even more pissed off because Tate, still high on drugs, couldn't stop giggling. Even when he explained he'd been arrested on suspicion of having stolen the car, driving without insurance and driving under the influence, he'd break into a big belly laugh every few sentences. Then, to rub salt in the wounds, a still giggling Tate asked whether Tucker would mind getting into one of his other cars, driving down to Southend Police Station and giving him a lift home. Under the circumstances, it was almost a pleasure for Tucker on his arrival to tell Tate that Steele had been arrested. Although Tucker stood to lose some cash, Tate had put more than £55,000 into the deal, most of it borrowed from other people. If the deal had gone belly up, Tate was going to have to find the cash to repay the debt. Right away, Tate went very quiet. Tucker then said he would arrange for someone to come and get him before slamming down the phone and calling Craig Rolfe. By the time we got there, it was obvious that Tate knew all about Steele being arrested. Rolfe's girlfriend Donna Jaggers told the police later. He had the most money in the deal, and he was anxious to find out what was going on. He couldn't make the call while he was banged up, so as soon as he got in the car, he grabbed Craig's phone and called Jackie Street. She told him everything was safe, and immediately he seemed to calm down a lot. But it only lasted a few minutes. Once he was sure his investment was safe, Tate soon began to get hyped up once more. He demanded to know if Rolfe had any cocaine or ecstasy on him and insist they make a detour to find some. When Jaggers protested that she and Craig had plans for that evening, Tate suddenly exploded in a fit of rage. He started smashing his fists up and down on the dashboard, screaming at the top of his lungs that all he wanted was a good time and they shouldn't be so uptight. It was like watching a kid having a tantrum. Then Tate started bragging about all the deals he had in place, about how rich he was going to be in just a few days' time, how he was going to set up his own smuggling ring with his brother and hire a new cheaper pilot than Steele to bring the stuff over, how he was going to get a bigger house, a brand new Merc, how he'd even buy Tucker a new Porsche to make up for breaking the last one. Whatever planet Tate was living on, it certainly wasn't Earth. Just after 6 p.m, more than 12 hours after being arrested, Jack Womes found himself sitting opposite Customs Officer Rodney Sales. Having been friendly and talkative earlier that morning when he thought he might be able to bluff his way out of trouble, Womes now resorted to a classic criminal technique, the no comment interview. Right, Mr. Womes. Well, I want to ask you about events at around 2:30 this morning, but really I want to start yesterday afternoon. I want to start with the other people, if I may. Do you know a Michael John Steele? Is that no reply? If it's going to be no reply, can you say no reply or... Jack cleared his throat. No comment. No comment, okay. Do you know a Gordon Edward Stevens? No comment. Do you know Peter Corey? No comment. I feel bloody stupid asking you this, but do you know your brother John? Womes? No comment. Now come on, Jack. Surely you know your own brother. No comment. And so it went on for the remainder of the 7-minute interview. Michael Steele had little short of a lifetime's experience of the interview room behind him. He knew his rights and he knew the law only too well. And as Customs Officer Richard Hills was about to find out, with a villain of that calibre, unless you've got a cast iron case on the table in front of them, they'll never admit to anything, and they'll make your life hell for even daring to try. Right, Mr. Steele, Hills began. You were arrested at Felixstowe Ferry this morning. What were you doing there? Let me explain something to you before we go any further. Yesterday morning, I think I was asked my name and address 6 times by different officers. Now that one little bit of information has led me to being arrested and charged with a serious offence. I was brought to this police station, strip searched, put into a cell, no ventilation, no urinal, no drinking water and no bedding. Furthermore, I'd like to explain to you that as of this moment, I've got nothing whatsoever to say to you for this simple reason. You've arrested me on what I call a trumped up charge, and anything I say now in answer to your questions will be no comment. No comment, no comment. And to save yourself and me any further time wasting, I'll explain to you now that I don't intend to answer any questions. I've done nothing wrong, and for that reason I'm not answering any questions, and it's because of the way I've been treated. Therefore, I'm going to answer no more questions as of now, and for anybody who reads or listens to this tape later orally or in transcript, I don't want to sound unreasonable by sitting here being quiet while you put question after question to me, but I'll tell you now, I'm not answering any of your questions. I've no intention of doing so. I've no need to answer the questions. I've done nothing wrong. And like I say, so far, all I've done is give 6 people my name and address that's landed me up in here. Nothing further, nothing more to say, as of now. And that was that. Still refused to utter another word throughout the remainder of the 8-minute interview. Finally, it was the turn of Peter Corey, with Richard Hills doing the honours once again. At first, it seemed that Corey might be the weak link with the loose tongue. He was offered a solicitor but declined, wrongly assuming that the customs officials would believe he had nothing to hide if he didn't want one. But not having had the opportunity to speak to the others and find out what their stories were, he soon realised he was painting himself into a corner. "OK," began Hills. "You were arrested this morning at Felixstowe Ferry in the early hours of the morning. What were you doing there?" "I was coming in on a boat." "What sort of boat was that?" "Diving boats." "I don't know the names, just went out in them." "Right, and I take it that the boat is not your property then?" "It's definitely not mine, no." "Whose is it?" "Well, as far as I know, it's Mr. Steele's." "And what was the purpose of the trip in the boat?" "He put a lot of work into it. He wanted to go out and test the computer on board, whatever it is. I think that's what he said." "Do you want to come out?" I said, "Yeah." "I see. Did you launch the boat from Felixstowe Ferry?" "Where's Felixstowe Ferry?" "It's where you were arrested last night." "Oh, yes, yeah. After that, Corey's answers to Hill's questions became more and more vague, until he finally realised that he was making the situation far worse and requested a solicitor. 40 minutes later, Corey was back in the hot seat with a new attitude and confident response to the questions. "I've said all I'm going to say," he told Hills, bringing the proceedings to an unexpectedly premature end. Later that evening, the news came back from the Customs Forensic Lab that cannabis resin had been found on the deck of the boat. But it was no cause for celebration. The total weight was 262 micrograms. It wasn't enough to charge someone with personal possession, let alone with smuggling. It wasn't even enough to roll a decent joint. The Range Rover had been examined and it was clean. Customs had no choice but to let the trio go. Darren Nicholls had left the Delta Hotel early in the morning to catch the train that would take him to the ferry terminal. Totally oblivious to the events back home, he booked a cabin and spent most of the journey losing even more money on the roulette wheel, then drowned his sorrows in the bar. Back in Harwich, he bought some duty-free lager for himself and a pile of cigarettes for Sandra, then made his way to his car for the drive home. Darren Nicholls states, "I switched on my mobile phone as I thought I'd probably have a message from Mick or Jack, but there was nothing. I tried calling them on their mobiles but couldn't get through, so I called Sandra and told her I was on my way back. I kept trying Jack and Mick all the way back to Braintree with no luck, so finally I tried Mick at home. Jackie Street answered. 'Hi Darren,' she went. 'Mick's not here at the moment. There's been a bit of a misunderstanding. He was out fishing in his boat and Customs thought he was up to something, so they arrested him coming into Brighton-Sea Marina. Everything's going to be okay though.' Mick was a clever git. He knew only too well that someone might be listening in on the phone, and he wasn't going to give anything away. By telling Jackie that everything was going to be okay, he was giving me a clear signal that the drugs had already been unloaded and that Customs hadn't found anything. Mick didn't get home till really late that night, so I didn't get to see him until the next day. Customs had held on to the Range Rover and the boat for further forensic examination, and I wanted to get the full story. With a big grin on his face, he explained that once they'd unloaded the drugs and stashed them safely in Mick's mum's garage, they decided to get the boat out of Brightlingsea, where they had been spotted by the harbour master, who, unbeknown to them, had called the police. Mick's friend Gordon Stevens lived right on the beach, so once the boat was on the trailer, they all stopped off for a cup of tea. Jack remembered he'd left the lights on in the Range Rover and went to turn them off, but he never came back. When Mick went to find him, he poked his head over the embankment and saw Jack being interviewed by the two coppers, and then dashed back to the house. He and Peter took all the incriminating evidence they could find, receipts from abroad, foreign money, maps, backup coordinates for the GPS, everything, and burned them in the toilet. Mick had been trying to avoid giving his name because he knew that with his track record they'd clap him in the irons as soon as he did. Only they didn't, so he decided to call their bluff. While they were waiting for customs to arrive, he made an excuse about needing to get on the boat and deprogram the GPS. That was pretty crucial because the system stores all the coordinates of the last journey. If anyone had looked at it, they would have seen that Mick left early the previous day, made a brief stop in Blankenberg, a brief stop in Point Clear, and then come back to the marina. Mick wouldn't have a leg to stand on. But as it was, he was able to get rid of the evidence. He still had time to kill and the police didn't seem bothered. So he gave them a story about needing to get salt water off the boat and began washing down the insides, hoping to get any loose traces of cannabis out. And he'd virtually succeeded. Mick was totally relaxed about the whole thing. In fact, he thought it was really funny that they'd blown it, and he kept right on laughing about it as he took me to his mum's garage in his Hilux and gave me a couple of kilos to sell. It was another story he could add to his list of narrow escapes. He was totally convinced that it was just bad luck, that they'd been spotted by the harbour master. But I wasn't so convinced. Now, I've got no way of proving it, but I'm pretty sure that I'm right about what really happened that morning. Everyone knows that customs don't find fuck all by pure chance. Most of the time they're acting on tip-offs. And when they swooped on Mick and Jack, I think they were acting on a tip-off that they should be on the lookout for a certain small boat coming back in from the sea in the early hours. And who did the tipping? I think it was Dopey Harris. Why him? Well, for one thing, that was the trip that he found out that we took the stuff back to England by boat. None of us knew about the second reason at the time, but once we did, it became blindingly obvious that Harris had absolutely nothing to lose and £124,000 worth of everything to gain. You've been listening to Blogs 19, written by Tony Thompson. This book is available to purchase online at Amazon and other online book retailers. Many thanks for joining me for this video. Very shortly you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, including the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Take care. Cheers.